And we continue at 2:05 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, it doesn't get more L.A. than this. 1 year after the city of Los Angeles vowed to clean up the graffiti at the famous graffiti towers, the graffiti towers still have graffiti.
Well, it wouldn't be the graffiti tower without it. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Well, even though voters this last November swept out the two Soros district attorneys, the two bold-faced names that made more headlines than virtually anyone else in the state of California for being pro-criminal. I'm, of course, speaking of Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price.
Quite frankly.
And former Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon.
Quite frankly.
But we didn't sweep out all the trash. We still have one Soros attorney as the Attorney General of California, Rob Bonta.
Mr. Bucket of Cliches himself.
Every type of leadership is about meeting the moment and rising to the occasion, and this is what's required. And so we're stepping up and getting it done.
And now the Attorney General, who, of course, is from Oakland, was the assemblyman from Oakland, and has deep ties to the Dong family. That family, of course, was raided by the FBI for alleged corruption related to contracts with the city of Oakland. That was when our favorite mayor in Oakland, her home was raided too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And the Dong family is also the benefactor to Attorney General Rob Bonta. Many of the local papers in the Bay Area say Rob Bonta is not part of the investigation into the Dong family or to Shang Tao because he is compromised, which is exactly what you don't want, a compromised Attorney General. But that is apparently, allegedly, what we have going on right now in California. So Bonta takes every opportunity to make sure that the heat is off of him, and he finds different ridiculous things to attach himself to, like suing the federal government, nuisance lawsuit after nuisance lawsuit, to present him as being a leader of the resistance. And most recently, Randy, he's going after law enforcement and siding with juvenile inmates.
Rob Bonta held a so hastily thrown together press conference, it wasn't even on his own YouTube page yesterday, alleging that 30 probation officers who worked at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall in the span of 6 months between July of 2023 and December of 2023 organized and encouraged over 69 fights between inmates that Rob Bonta described as Gladiator-style fights, whatever the hell that means.
And if you're Rob Bonta, if there's one group that you don't want to be pissing off right now, it's prison guards, because my guess is at some point in the future, you're going to become real acquainted with them.
Now, this obviously isn't the first time that Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall has been in the news. We have covered extensively what's been going on there with the massive staffing shortages where, thanks to the probation commission and the state board that regulates places like juvenile halls, the officers who have to work there cannot defend themselves when they're assaulted by inmates. They cannot do anything to the inmates or they will get in trouble, which could include trying to break up fights between inmates. So is it necessarily that they were standing around and watching and encouraging boy fights? Or is it we have restricted them to the point where they cannot act when something like that happens because we have let the inmates run the asylum?
And, of course, in California right now, there is an ongoing war on self-defense.
For more on Bonta's allegation of boy fights from 30 different probation officers who worked at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, which will now contribute to even bigger of a staffing shortage there, here's KTLA.
Dozens of LA County probation officers face criminal charges tonight after an investigation uncovered so-called gladiator fights among...
What does that mean?
It means that Rob Bonta is desperate for headlines, so he needed to come up with something that would get the attention of the different assignment editors in L.A.
I mean, you hear gladiator fights, you think that maybe they hand somebody a sword and they're fighting a lion. I don't understand.
Gladiator fights among teens at a juvenile detention center.
California Attorney General Ron Bonta announcing the charges today. Sandra Mitchell live in the KTLA News Center tonight. Sandra.
Micah, disturbing child abuse. That's how the Attorney General describes it. Almost 150 juveniles involved in these kicking and punching attacks. The Attorney General says the fights went on for at least...
Did any of them get in trouble?
Probably not. No, you see, they're children. They're our babies, and we need to make sure that they're taken care of.
Well, and from everything that I've heard from probation officers that have called this radio station is that you can't even report violent incidents because management doesn't want to hear it because you are not allowed to even do anything about it. And you cannot intervene when someone's being violent. And right now, the people that actually make it to juvenile hall are the worst of the worst. And thanks to 4 years of George Gascon not charging juveniles as adults, all of those cases went to juvie instead of regular jail or prison. So who do you think is in there right now?
You have truly violent people there. But again, if you create a paper trail, they're going to stay in longer. And that's exactly the opposite of what people like Rob Bonta want to have happen.
The Attorney General says the fights went on for at least 6 months with probation officers watching it all.
What was the allegation here? They were gambling on it?
It's not like it's cockfighting.
Were they picking sides? Was there cheering and hooting and hollering going on? The video that was unearthed, and apparently there's 70 other videos that Rob Bonta says will corroborate with it, shows a bunch of inmates beating each other up, and the people who work there can't do anything about it.
Okay, but if that's the policy of the detention center, isn't that exactly what you would expect to see in the video?
They have created a policy where you are damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because if you get involved in that and you get assaulted, you have no defense. If you get involved in that and you have to use physical restraint on the inmate, you're going to get thrown under the bus. So what exactly are you supposed to do as a probation officer? This is why so many are out on medical leave or retiring early, taking their 20 instead of their 30, because this department is a freaking mess.
How do you get anyone to work there? If they create these policies that create these chaotic environments, and then you are in the video as the chaos is taking place because you're following the rules that have been given to you by your bosses, and then you get blamed by this bastard who's trying to create headlines by turning you into the villain? How do you get anyone to clock into work?
Well, you don't, and that's what's exactly been going on. So the employees that are there, you have to, when you go into the juvenile facility, you have to turn in your phone, you've got to go through security, and you've got an 8-hour shift, and at the end of that 8-hour shift, you may get called by management and say, well, there's no one else to replace you, so you have to stay for another 8 hours, so screw you if you happen to have childcare or something. On top of that, there's been such a massive staffing shortage, they have taken field deputies off of the other role of probation, checking up on all the people on probation, ankle monitors, sex offenders, what have you, taking them off the field so nobody's checking on those people and forcing them into the juvenile hall to work there, a job that they are not trained to do.
When Rob Bonta ends up going to prison, we should have some kind of listener party.
They called them...
Will it be in Oakland?
Well, a case could be made.
They called them Gladiator fights, a group of young people ganging up on a 17-year-old at an L.A. juvenile hall.
One youth in the...
Did they hand them those poles with the big cushions like on American Gladiators?
They have Nitro chasing after him?
Ganging up on a 17-year-old at an L.A. juvenile hall.
One youth in the detention center being attacked by a series of other youth who come at him one by one.
And this definitely wasn't gang-related, right, Bonta?
No, not our babies. No way.
As detention officers stand by watching. Some officers are even seen laughing and shaking hands with the young people involved.
Well, they don't want to get beaten up.
Yeah, they're following your stupid policies, dummy.
Now, State Attorney General Rob Bonta announcing criminal indictments against 30 L.A. County probation officers.
I guarantee every single person who works at that facility right now is examining their options to retire early.
Oh, why would you work there? Why would you show up knowing that this criminal is going to try to put you in prison and is going to try to paint you as the bad guy?
Well, and it gets worse because the state board that oversees Los Padrinos is made up of all the activists that think that we should decarcerate everybody. And you know what they keep saying? Well, the conditions at Los Padrinos are unsuitable for youth. And what do they cite as the conditions? That there's a lack of staffing because nobody wants to work there. So they actively made it so dangerous that no one wants to work there. And because no one wants to work there, they're advocating for every single one of those inmates to be released into the public.
Well, this is the playbook for everything. They make it impossible to execute anyone in California. And then they turn around and they try to act like they're budget hawks. And they go, this just costs so much money. Why don't we just get rid of the death penalty to just save the state a bunch of money? And it's like, well, wait a minute. You were the idiots that made it cost so much.
The investigation began with this leaked footage obtained by the LA Times. Bonta today said a State Department of Justice investigation uncovered more videos showing 69 violent fights involving
Had to be that number, didn't it?
It is prison.
Fights involving 143 youth detainees.
By the way, what does it say that none of those were ever reported or documented? Because even though there's video evidence of all these fights, the officers cannot file any reports about violence in the halls.
That's right. They don't want a paper trail because they don't want anyone's sentences being extended.
So what can you do except just watch as the boys beat each other up?
This is what the cops are forced to do across the board, though. They don't want the cops engaging with anyone because they don't want accusations of racism. They don't want accusations of excessive use of force. They don't want accusations of discrimination of any kind. So they just say, all right, we want you to just stay away, let the bad thing happen, and then just show up and take a report.
Some as young as 12 years old.
The officers don't step in, don't intervene, and don't protect their charges.
And have you ever thought why?
Ask yourself that question, criminal.
Rob Bonta's first train of thought on that is, well, obviously they're organizing boy fights.
The officers look more like referees or audience members at a prize fight, not adults.
According to a civil lawsuit, the teen at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall in Downey suffered a traumatic brain injury and a broken nose. In a statement to KTLA today, the Department of Justice said the current staff named in today's indictments have all been placed on leave without pay. And
gee, I wonder why there's such a staffing shortage.
Yeah, it's almost as if you're not going to be able to operate the facility, which is exactly what they want. If they had it their way, they would shut down these facilities. They are abolitionists, many on the left, who do not believe that we should operate prisons. Don't forget, the county of Los Angeles voted to shut down Men's Central Jail because they don't want to have any place to put them. And if you don't have any place to put them, then you have to leave them on the street so they can do that to you.
And we have zero tolerance for misconduct. Bonta also believes the fights were actually set up by probation officers, and he says this should be a warning.
You notice, by the way, Bonta believes that this is what happened. Go back to the fire chief that we put on, where she didn't say, I believe this happened. She said, this is what happened. This is the proof. This is what happened. Here are the emails. This is what happened. Here is the correspondence. He's not providing any of that evidence. He's making these wild allegations, and he's just hoping that you believe him.
Rob Bonta doesn't want you to think about who's actually in Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. It's not the 10th grader that was cut in class that's in juvie. This is a place for people awaiting trial and waiting for their cases to be adjudicated. So it is full of gang members awaiting trial. People that are so violent, they didn't qualify for one of L.A. County's 10,000 diversion programs.
Should be a warning to others.
If you abuse your power, we'll hold you accountable.
Can't wait till someone holds him accountable.
By the way, how biased is this report where they just put this jackass up there? They let him make all of these outlandish allegations, and there's no pushback. There's no other side that's presented.
Well, there's a very specific reason for that. the union doesn't back the officers. Management doesn't back the officers. They've thrown the officers under the bus over and over and over again. And outside of being able to call places like this radio station under a fake name and to tell their stories, if they speak out, they get retaliated against. And that means no pension, something that some of these people have worked for 30 years.
This is what happens in a one-party state. This is what you're left with. No one can tell the truth. The fire chief tells the truth, she gets fired. You're sitting on a committee in Sacramento, you're a member of the legislature, and you tell the truth, you get demoted. You get kicked off the committee. If you are working in a facility like this and you know that the state is creating these insane policies that lead to this chaos, you can't tell the truth because you'll have your pension taken away. It's like we live in some sort of communist country.
These inmates are not just beating each other up. They are on a regular basis assaulting the officers and all the people that work inside this juvenile hall. And they're not even allowed to report that. They just get put on medical leave, making the staffing even that much more tighter. And this keeps happening, and there is no fix for this. You know what the fix was for it? L.A. County Board of Supervisors put a state of emergency out saying, we're going to spend a whole bunch of money on advertising to recruit new officers.
If I worked there, I'd come up with some BS reason to go out on medical leave, too.
A lot of these aren't BS. They literally, you have people with broken limbs because they were assaulted, and it doesn't matter. They can't report it.
If your work environment is that bad, you'll find a way to make sure you don't have to show up.
22 of those indicted officers were in court today to hear those charges against them. The other 8 will face the judge next month. Live in News Center, I'm Sandra Mitchell. Cher, Micah, back to you.
And, of course, another reason the county doesn't want to talk about this is there are several unfair labor practices lawsuits that are in the middle of being adjudicated in the county, specifically about these unsafe work conditions and this air of retaliation that's going on in the county because nobody has the the probation officers' backs. Nobody.
And you hear, oh, the judge will hear the case. And you think, okay, well, at least there's some fair person involved in the process. No. The judges are appointed by the same people that appointed the jackass that's making the outlandish allegations, Gavin Newsom.
But no, Rob Bonta's right. It's just boy fights.
Oh, yes. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, with the end of the show quickly approaching, if you want to continue listening to us after we sign off at 3, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is go to KABC.com, click on podcasts, go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You can do a Google on the YouTube or get that handy-dandy KABC app. Search KABC AM in the Apple App Store or the Android Store. It's the easiest way to listen live to this radio station and download all the podcasts. Listen to our podcast where we cover all the gadflies at LA City Council, including this drop, which one of our listeners said is a contender for Drop of the Year 2025.
They cannot continue to bully my body.
In the meantime, what do you say we make a couple of listeners very happy?
Well, let's do that right now. 790 KABC welcomes Herman's Hermit, starring Peter Noon at the Canyon in Agora Hills on April 4th. Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com, but right now, caller number 9 at 1-888-795-2222 gets a pair of tickets to the show. Tickets furnished by The Canyon, where music meets the soul. Good luck dialing.
As we mentioned before, we have an update for you on the graffiti tower in downtown Los Angeles. For more, here's Randy Wang.
The Tiger Tower still has the tagging. For more, here's ABC 7.
It has been more than a year since we first started bringing you stories about the graffiti-covered towers in downtown L.A.
That means it's been more than a year since this.
The neighborhood kids, the down-ass kids don't like it.
Oh, that's a perennial classic.
I had such high hopes for Imelda, and who knew that she could be bought and paid for by Mayor Bass by putting her on the Metro board?
I could have told you that.
Those vandalized buildings are still there.
Eyewitness News reporter Kevin Ozebek joins us now with his ABC 7 On Your Side investigation into those towers. Kevin, what did you find out?
Well, Mark and Giovanna, construction stopped on the so-called graffiti towers all the way back in 2019. And last year's...
Those eyesores have been sitting there for 6 years.
Well, the neighborhood kids, the down-ass kids, don't like it.
The neighborhood kids, the down-ass kids don't like it.
And last year, City Council took action to get all that graffiti cleaned up. So why is nearly every floor still tagged from top to bottom?
Because it's the LA City Council.
They can't do anything right.
These are the same people that have vowed for decades to clean up the homeless. And you know what they don't do? Clean up the homeless.
In fact, they do everything but that.
To some, this is 49 floors of art.
No.
To who?
Well, we know who.
The neighborhood kids, the down-ass kids don't like it.
To some, this is 49 floors of art.
That takes talent, honestly.
To others,
that is part of the voting population.
Yep, that's how we ended up with Karen Bass.
To others, it's 340 unfinished condo units that make for one huge eyesore.
It could have been so much better.
I don't really feel comfortable walking around here in these parts because of, I think partly because of this.
Like, did they kind of like catch your attention?
Yeah, no, definitely. I was wondering exactly what the story was.
Okay, what's that accent?
I don't know, but those are all Caruso voters.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I think this guy's a tourist.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was wondering exactly what the story was.
I think that's Australian.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was wondering exactly what the story was.
Well, here is the story on why the so-called graffiti towers remains to this day tagged and unfinished. In 2015, Beijing-based developer Oceanwide Holdings broke ground on what is officially called Oceanwide Plaza.
And how did they break ground? Well, Jose Huizar could tell you.
Is he still in prison?
I have to look that up.
In 2019, the company ran out of cash and stopped construction.
49. How many parcels of land in this city can we not build on because they're owned by the Chinese? And not just any Chinese, the bankrupt Chinese.
49.
Last year, the city council voted to give Oceanwide Holdings until February 17th, 2024 to start removing the graffiti.
That's over a year ago.
And it looks like they missed their deadline.
This was then District 14 council member Kevin De Leon.
In the event if they don't do it, then we will do it for him, and we will stiff him with the bill.
That didn't happen either.
Nope.
Another promise broken, Kevin.
Quite frankly.
But the city never scrubbed any of this off either. After estimating it would cost $1 million taxpayer bucks to paint over all that tagging, LA's Office of Community Beautification tells 7 on Your Side Investigate.
By the way, if we had Doge, there's a department we could get rid of.
Oh, $1 million to paint a building?
Also, why do we have a Office of Community Beautification?
And the city looks like this.
What exactly is beautiful about the city of Los Angeles?
LA's Office of Community Beautification tells 7 on Your Side Investigates that it was decided that the city should not incur the cost for abatement of graffiti on this privately owned building.
So let the eyesore be an eyesore.
And then you stick the bill to some bankrupt Chinese company, and they never pay you back.
This is why this thing's been sitting here for 6 years, and why people decided, hey, I'd climb in there, tag every floor, and no one's going to do anything about it.
And no one did. Half the time, they did it in the middle of the day.
After another year, some are starting to worry all the graffiti, all the razor wire, and all the construction materials will be greeting millions of visitors.
It's going to be one of our tourist attractions.
Oh, just imagine how great that beauty's going to look during the Olympics.
In just a few short years, LA will be hosting the World Cup and then the Olympics.
I think that it's time for the city and the county.
There's going to be so many things for all the tourists to see. The burn scars, the unfinished buildings, the homeless encampments. Boy, LA is just going to be a destination in 2028.
Oh, think about all the Japanese businessmen taking their picture in front of that building.
I think that it's time for the city and the county and actually each tier of government.
Of course, if they're going to interview somebody downtown, what happens, Johnny?
There's the siren.
I think that it's time for the city and the county and actually each tier of government, right, to take a look at this, to be involved and to figure out what their role is in ensuring that we don't continue to have this structure being the blighted eyesore that it is.
Yeah, that's not how LA government works, baby.
No, she must be new here.
But for right now, the LA skyline will still be touched with all that tagging.
Nice alliteration.
Touched by that tagging. More like raped.
Oh, my.
Contractors and other creditors who are owed millions from this project pushed Oceanwide Holdings into bankruptcy court. Isabel Horado is now the one representing District 14.
Oh, is she awake for this interview?
Wake up. Wake up, Isabel. Wake up.
Is there anything the city legally can do to get that graffiti cleaned up right now?
I mean, it's in the bankruptcy. It's a privately owned property.
So no. Hey, how is it privately owned if it's defaulted and bankrupt?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense now, does it?
All right.
She doesn't really have a firm grasp on most things, including that if you fall asleep in city council chambers, somebody going to take a picture of you.
Oh, no, she was in deep thought.
She's like, I was reading. And today I saw her in council chambers. She has the biggest reading glasses I've ever seen. She wasn't wearing them on Friday.
No, she wasn't.
All right, so Oceanwide Plaza has been up for sale for nearly a year now. The broker tells me there's a ton of interest and negotiations are underway with, quote, several parties.
Have you ever heard a real estate broker say anything else about any property?
It's a real fixer-upper, Randy.
Yes, sure, it's been sitting here for a year, and we've had no actual offers, but there's a lot of interest.
A lot of people kicking tires.
There's a ton of interest and negotiations are underway with, quote, several parties.
No, they're not.
He also says Oceanwide is looking into ways to remove that graffiti.
They're bankrupt.
There's nothing in that statement that's true.
However, we could not confirm that with Oceanwide. The company did not return any of our messages, but of course we'll keep...
Do they even have a phone anymore?
Maybe Isabel is answering the phones over there. She's just sawing some logs.
Any of our messages, but of course we'll keep watching this to see if any of those negotiations result in a sale.
Such a mess.
Clock is ticking, too, toward those huge events coming up.
Sure is.
Kevin,
Thank you.
Now, Johnny, since in this story, a certain former LA City Councilman was invoked, do you think there's something we have to do?
All rise.
Madam President, today is Tuesday and time for the flag salute.
Mr. De Leon, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this morning?
Thank you very much, Madam President. It'd be an honor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Indivisible, pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. For which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's hard to imagine that council district deteriorated to that point.
Quite frankly.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Cammie writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. Mother Goose is cooked. Great show today. I have found new respect for Crowley. She definitely has a case and has shown that Bass is a full-blown liar. Everyone can agree that Bass will cry racism because that's all she's got. I'd love to be on a fly on her wall at her place today. Would be monumental to get rid of the socialist stranglehold on Los Angeles. Thanks, John and Randy.
I can't argue with anything in that email.
Now, you saw, Johnny, we've already got several people emailing us as well. The people who want to recall Karen Bass, they filed their paperwork today.
Yes, they did, and we have an update on that, don't we?
Let's go to, what was this, KTLA. Here we go.
There is a movement underway to recall Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass over her handling of the Palisades fire. The LA Times is reporting paperwork was filed yesterday with the city's Ethics Commission. The filing now allows those who are involved to raise money to place a recall on the ballot. Now, to trigger a recall election, opponents would need to collect approximately 330,000 signatures, or 15% of the city's registered voters, within the next 4 months.
That's a tall ask.
That is going to be very difficult to do.
This is part of the problem with George Gascon's recall. The number of signatures they had to get and verify was so high, it was almost impossible. Plus, the people running that recall were grifters.
pretty much.
Both times.
The mayor is being criticized for not being in the city during the fire. Bass says she was not told about the severity of fire weather conditions before she...
That is the worst argument in the world.
And she's just sticking to it. And you know what? At this point, if you're still standing by her and you're willing to go along with the lie, I think you're going to be with her till the end of times, too.
Before she left for a diplomatic mission to Ghana. One of the reasons...
No, it wasn't a diplomatic mission. She was there for a freaking party. And she didn't have to go. There was no official mayoral duty to be on a diplomatic mission. This was a favor to Biden, and she chose Biden over doing her damn job.
And don't forget, it wasn't even a favor to Biden. It was a Biden favor to her. She wanted to be vice president and got passed over. And because of that, they helped clear the field for her so she could be mayor of L.A., and he would give her tickets to these diplomatic missions as a plum for being passed over. That's what this is about. This is not like there was pressing business to be done in Ghana, and Biden thought she was the only one who could get the job done. Oh, no, this was a gift to her.
Fire weather conditions before she left for a diplomatic mission to Ghana. One of the reasons she cited for firing LAFD Chief Kristen Crowley. As we've reported, the mayor's staff was briefed by the National Weather Service prior to her trip.
You don't say.
And it was all over every channel in town.
A political strategist for Bass says the recall is nothing more than an extreme right-wing stunt designed to divide the city when we need to move forward, his words.
Well, that's the same strategy they used in Oakland, and how exactly did that one work out?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, it's the same strategy that was used by Gavin, and it did for him. And I've got to say, as awful as Bass is, and she is worse than I thought she would be, and that's saying something, I'm still undecided on how I fall on the recall quite yet. Because what we don't want to have happen is we don't want there to be a recall attempt that fails, because then that gives her a win. If that gives her a win, then she will say, look, they didn't get the signatures they needed, and it's because the people of L.A. are standing behind me. And the minute she goes from looking like a loser to looking like someone who's on the upswing, it becomes easier for her to raise money. It becomes easier for her to get endorsements. It makes easier for her to go on TV and not get badgered about all of her failures related to the fire and homelessness and everything else. The way it works in politics is similar to the way it works in gambling, and I love both. You sit down at that blackjack table, and you get a 21, and the next hand you get an 11, and you double down, and you win that hand, and then you get an 18. You know how this works. You win in rashes, you lose in rashes. The more you win, the more you bet. The more you bet, the more you win. And when you're riding a wave, you want to ride that baby as long and as far as you can. But if you're losing, sometimes you have to step away from the table because the stars just aren't aligned for you that day. And you have to know when to stop. You have to know when to take a break. Go to the bar, have a drink, go to the room, watch a movie, whatever. For Karen Bass, she's just taking loss after loss after loss after loss. She cannot win a news cycle. It's just not in the cards for her right now. What you don't want to do is you don't want to create an unforced error where you give her a win. Because if you give her a win and she breaks that cycle of losing, then she's got an opportunity to bounce back. Right now it looks like she's dead. But in politics, people come back from the dead all the time. Look at Dick Nixon. He lost the presidential election, lost for governor, and poof, became president in 1968. That happens. Why give her the opportunity? She doesn't deserve to be mayor. She definitely deserves to be kicked out. But we need to make sure that we find the best way to kick her out of office. And that may be the next time she's up.